Hello, my name is Alexis and I'm making this video to show you my process for creating the bioluminescent gulper eel and the anglerfish that you saw at the beginning of the video. This is a redraw of a piece I drew in 2017. It's my first digital art piece and I'm by no means a pro. So there will probably be things that I do in this video that are not efficient and don't make sense, but I've had a few people ask me how I drew it, so I'm just going to go over the basics in this video. The first thing that I did was to import a photo of the original pencil and pen version of my piece. Once I had that in the first layer, I lowered the opacity and made a new layer. On the second layer, I was making an attempt to outline everything with the idea that I could just fill it in later, but that seemed too tedious, so I ended up actually scrapping that in favor of creating a couple new layers and blocking in things like the eyes and the general shape of the eel. My method for the whole piece, once I sort of figured out what I was doing, or rather what was working for me, can actually be boiled down to a few main concepts. While I did make different groups of layers for things like the fins, the eyes, the body, the background, the way I build up my shadows and highlights was the same for each part. I started off by blocking in the section I was working on with a base tone. This can be the average of all the tones in the section, or in my case, I used black with the intent of building up only enough highlights to make the eel readable. After the base tones are blocked in and the general shapes cleaned up with an eraser tool, I'd make two more layers. One would be for highlights and one would be for shadows. I always work from dark to light, building my shadows up first before switching to my highlight layer and adding in my lightest tones. I kept switching between these layers throughout the drawing process, cleaning up the gradients with a smudge tool and adding more and more highlights as necessary to try to make it a legible piece. After I had my highlights and shadows in place, I started trying to add some more texture by lowering the brush size to the smallest size possible and using the same shade of blue that I used in the eel's eyes to add dots all over its body. I also used some fuchsia after looking at some reference photos on Google Images and seeing that some bioluminescent fish appear to be purple. I wanted some contrast from all the blue, so I thought that would be a good idea to add those in. One of the coolest things about this redraw was that it afforded me the ability to fix some of the things that I didn't like in the original piece. So as you can see here, the gulper eel's tail is wrapped rather loosely around the anglerfish. Later on in the video, you'll see me tighten that up so it looks like it's actually being held within its grasp. The lighting was truly one of the biggest challenges in this piece. A lot of you don't know me or my work, but almost all of my art prior to this project was just India ink and graphite pencil on paper with white ink for the highlights. The only time I really broke away from the method that I mentioned previously for building up shadows and highlights is actually these fins that we see being drawn here. I created a base layer for the fins in which I blocked them in using black, and then I lowered the opacity so they would be transparent because I wanted them to look wispy. The highlight and shadow stage was the same as it is in the other part. The only difference was I wanted these to be see-through, so I made sure to keep them looking light and airy as I could. Around this time in the drawing, I showed it to some of my friends on an art Discord I'm in to ask for critiques, and the general consensus was it was way too dark and no one could tell what it was. So I started adjusting the highlights to try to make it more legible, because I do want it to be readable for the majority of viewers of the piece and not just for people who are looking at it on an iPad like I am. I tried adjusting the eel itself, I tried adjusting the background. I really was dead set on having it as dark as I could possibly get it while still being readable, but that did not seem like it would be possible at this time in the drawing process. I eventually got it to the point where I was happy with it, but you'll see me messing with things like that quite a bit throughout the rest of this video. For those who are still watching at this point in the video, I did just want to say that I am working on another redraw of a piece I did back in 2017. It's called a chimera. I actually uploaded a speed drawing of that one on YouTube, and you can watch that if you feel inclined to do so. The quality is quite poor, but it was fun to make. So I'll be redrawing that one at some point, and then I'll be posting the process for that as well if anyone's interested in seeing that. These fins gave me a lot of trouble, the ones on the top of the eel. I had a lot of issues getting them to feel like they were blending properly with the body of the eel. I believe around this time, I decided to take a break to add some dots, and then realized during that process that I had forgotten to add any kind of definition to the tentacle coming off the side of the eel's body. It had gotten lost in me blocking it out, and I'd never gone back in and shaded it, so I fixed that there. One of the really nice things about working in a program that uses layers like Procreate is that if you don't want to do something in the beginning of a piece, for example, I did not want to draw in the anglerfish in the beginning. I think because I knew that I was going to have to change the tentacles to get it the way I wanted to, and that kind of stressed me out. You can work on other things and then eventually go back to the layer that you blocked everything out on in the first place. So the layer that I blacked out the body of the eel, I eventually was able to go back, block out the body of the anglerfish, and then redline the tentacle to where I wanted it, clean it up, get it how I liked it. You can't do that so much on pen and pencil drawings, you know, if you're doing it on paper and you're working with a permanent medium like India ink. If I were to pull a line wrong, then I need to just hope that I can fix it. Whereas with this, you can just keep tweaking things, and you don't have to draw everything all at once. You don't have to worry about your lines not meeting up. It's really cool, and I'm probably going to do a lot more digital pieces, to be honest. I stuck to a palette of about 6 colors for this entire piece. I used the gouache brush with the smudge tool for blending things. I changed the size depending on the section I was trying to blend. You have to just mess with it a lot to figure out what works for specific parts and to get things the way that you want them. I did so many undos during this process. For adding the colors, I used the round brush under the painting brush set. And I have not purchased any new brush packs or used anything that's not just available through the base version of Procreate so far. Around this time, I finally decided to start working on the anglerfish, so you'll see me using a red brush to outline where I think the tentacles should go in this redraw, since I didn't like the way that they were in the original. I used the highlights to kind of block in the shapes a little bit more so I wouldn't lose them like the tentacle that I did on the top of the Gulper eel. I debated for a long time about what color I wanted the anglerfish's eyes to be, because I thought blue might be nice, but I wanted something that would contrast more and make the piece more interesting. So once I decided upon yellow, I began adding more highlight layers. So before I had just the shadow layer and then the blue highlight layer, I ended up adding an extra layer for the yellow since that's another light source and it's coming from a different direction. I wanted to have the ability to change it without it muddying together with the other highlights. So I do a lot of tweaking here. I asked for a lot of help from my art Discord and figuring out what looked right. Because like I said, I'm not a pro artist, I'm not a pro at digital art, I don't know what looks good, and it's always good to ask people for their opinions because they might see things that you don't after looking at a piece for so long. So a lot of the rest of the video is just me tweaking the light coming off of the anglerfish, adjusting the background a little bit, but I think around this time I was starting to feel pretty happy with how it was turning out. At this point in the video, I'm just sampling the color of the anglerfish's eyes and then using that to draw dots all over its body to again imply bioluminescence or a light source in this otherwise very dark drawing. And then I start adding more highlights to the nose, the fins, and the body of the eel to make the light source from the anglerfish appear a little bit stronger. I also started adding in more dots in the background to imply other light sources, like possibly another eel, Had some clusters to make it seem like there was a bigger fish in the background somewhere. The rest of the video is mainly just me tweaking the light sources until I felt like they were good. So it's just kind of up to your personal preference, but I messed with it until I felt like I was pretty happy with it, and I adjusted the background a little bit more. So not really much to say as far as the rest of the video goes, but I do appreciate you guys for watching if you made it this far. I had a lot of fun working on this piece, and I hope to do another recording soon. So I will just leave it at that and enjoy the rest of the video.